All right, I've touched on this before, and I wanted to talk about this more because I don't think you've probably heard this from anybody else or anywhere else. And this idea came to me in meditation, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, but I've hesitated to make a video on this for various reasons. And I just wanted to say that this is just my understanding of what Jesus's intentions were as a spiritual being and what he wanted to leave behind as a set of teachings. This is information that you might want to consider whether you're a Christian person or not, and just because you haven't heard this before. It's a different interpretation of one of the biggest religions that now has a strong power and influence over the world. Now, this might be different than what you believe or what you've been taught as a Christian, and I'm not saying you have to take my word for this. This is something for you to work out. If you're a Christian, you need to figure this out between you and Jesus. You can have a relationship with Jesus, even though he's in spirit form, and he can communicate to you. I know there's many Christians who have talked to me about having received what they consider message and communication from Jesus directly. And so I would ask any Christian who hasn't heard this before to pray to Jesus and ask him if what I'm about to tell you is correct, because I think it would change the way that you relate to Jesus's teachings, but this is for everyone as well. And another reason why I'm making this video is that in our belief system, people who do the heartfulness practice, the Sage-Mark system, there was communication between Jesus and the second master, Babaji, Sri Ramchandra of Shahjahanpur. Babaji intercommuned with Jesus among other famous and not so famous spiritual beings, what they call the divine hierarchy. Now, these are a series of spiritual beings that have either blessed this mission, have definitely blessed this mission and this spiritual work, but also contribute in one way or another. So Babaji intercommuned with Jesus and asked him, he said, there's all these Christians coming to me for spiritual training. Is it okay with you if I teach them the spiritual method? And Jesus said yes. And also there is a series of heart points, of spiritual heart points that are involved in the heartfulness meditation. And Babaji named one of them the point of Lord Jesus, because it's a point of peace, and it's where it's called the soul point. And so I could cover that in some future video, because that's, I think, very interesting for spiritual seekers. And then I think it was in July, it was this summer, I had a dream in which Jesus was in it. I often have dreams with spiritual beings in the dream, and I feel like it's my soul connecting with the soul of that spiritual being. Often it's with the masters of the heartfulness system, but other spiritual masters. And I even have dreams from people who leave YouTube comments if somebody asks me a question and maybe I hadn't answered it correctly or something, and there'll be some sort of what I consider soul-to-soul contact. So I've had these dreams, very vivid dreams, over the years, and specifically in the last couple of years since I've been making these videos. And in this dream, Jesus was sitting down, and I approached him and I said to him, I asked him, a lot of your followers, a lot of Christians come to my YouTube channel. Is it okay that I talk about your teachings with them? And he said to me with a smile, yes, that's why I am sending them to you. And I immediately woke up, and it was my experience that I actually had soul-to-soul contact with Jesus, and he was encouraging me to make these kind of videos, which I've been very hesitant to make because they're charged with a lot of different kinds of people's opinions. But I feel like, based in my experience and my view of these types of things, I've been given permission and even blessed to talk about these things. And the other thing I would say is, what I don't think most people understand is the Bible is other people's interpretations of Jesus's teachings, and also the Old Testament, which I'm going to get into in just a moment. But the Bible has been rewritten and translated, and people have edited it and changed things. And then there's people's sermons and then the official religions, and of course the various versions of the Bible that are different in terms of different words used, different interpretations. And you're often listening to other people's interpretations of what Jesus meant. In fact, that's what religion is, that somebody is saying, this is what Jesus meant, and this is what his teachings are, and the best way is to connect with the source, whether it be Jesus or God or whatever religion that you do. Connect directly to the source and not have a middleman, a go-between between you and God, or you and your spiritual teacher or savior, or whatever you think of this person, spiritual master. Have a direct interconnection, a heart-to-heart connection, where they tell you they give you the information of what their teachings actually meant. And so I'm going to pass on my experience, but this is for you to figure out. It's between you and God, or you and Jesus, or whatever. And I think that that's something that I would encourage people to do, not just in terms of these videos, but any religious teachings, to have a heart-to-heart relationship and have a deep connection with God in your heart, where you can feel God's love and God can communicate to you. Because this has happened in many instances in various religions. There's been many spiritual beings and mystics that had this ability to connect to God, and God would give them instructions and give them teachings and give them a mission and give them ideas to impart to their brothers and sisters. And now this is something that in an evolutionary movement that all people will soon be able to be capable of in the next couple of 100 years. And so I think this is something that everyone should start working on, because it's going to be important for humanity's future. When you get direct instructions from God, then you won't behave in a way that so many people indulge in, because you'll feel God's presence in your heart and you'll know you're doing wrong and you'll stop it. And so that's a wonderful future that we all have waiting for us in some next, I don't know, 100 or next couple of 100 years. A planet where everybody checks themselves, because the part of them that's God and their conscience and their hearts raise them to a higher level of vibration, and they just understand better what they're doing, and they just make the right choices. And so my first experience with the Old Testament was in catechism. I was raised Catholic, and I liked the Old Testament because there was more stories in it, where the New Testament was teachings and it was hard to understand as a young kid. The Old Testament was full of stories, and there was adventures and things like this. So I had a fond memory of this. And when I became an adult and we were homeschooling our children, my ex-wife read the Old Testament and I sat in because I wanted to listen to it. And the reaction that I had as an adult, and the reaction my children had, as we had taught them the heartfulness view of God as God being the essence of love, a God without ego, a God that can only love, and a God that is in everything, in every cell of your body, in every stone, in every building. The world, nothing can exist in this universe unless it's made up of God. God is the medium in which everything is created from. So if you go to the center of anything, if you trace it down to its base, then you'll find God. And as we heard the Old Testament, my children and I, we were all shocked, because God is petty, he's narcissistic, he's vengeful, he has a big ego, and he does a lot of punishing and does a lot of horrific things out of vengeance and pettiness. And I knew from reading the Old Testament and doing some research and reading some of Jesus' teachings, the God that Jesus presented was completely opposite of this and what I understand God to be. And then as I thought about it later on, I realized that the God that was being presented in the Old Testament was really blasphemous, because it was basically presenting God in a way that God isn't, presenting God as a bad man, not a good man, not like a bad king, like an evil king. So it was really spreading, basically slandering God and presenting God in a way that's just not accurate. And as I've made videos about this, and I've thought a lot more about the Christian tradition and Jesus' life and my understanding of all spiritual lives and spiritual organizations, I realized that what Jesus did, Jesus' life, is that, and there's some evidence that he went to India. People said that he went to India. I don't know about that or not. And he learned he learned some sort of yogic practice there, because a lot of what he teaches is very similar to a couple of different kinds of yoga. And whether that happened or not, there is one thing that we know, and that is Jesus transcended his religion. And there's a wonderful quote by the Indian saint Swami Vivekananda, and I'm paraphrasing the quote, but he basically says that religion is a great thing to be born into, but a horrible thing to die in. And what he means by that is religions teach a young person various things: ethic, morals, right livelihood, how to be a good person, and the framework of God. But religions externalize God, so God is far away from you, and you don't have an individual relationship with God, a heart-to-heart relationship. So you get the necessary training. It's like the kindergarten, but eventually you live a spiritual life. You become some sort of a mystic, and you connect to God on a heart-to-heart level, and then you have a spiritual life. You can feel God's love. And so you start off in religion, but you don't want to die in a religion. And what Jesus did, and many saints have done, many spiritual masters have done, is transcend his religion. He took the religious teachings, but eventually he made it a living connection to what he called God, his Father. And so then he came back with an entirely different teaching to the people that were available to him. And so he was no longer a Jewish person. He was born a Jew, but then he was something else, a spiritual being. And again, there was no Christianity. He wasn't a Christian. He had no religion. And then he brought back this teaching, and it was a higher level teaching of God on a higher level of consciousness. And he's basically said in various places, and by his actions, this other thing you've been taught isn't correct. And so the fact that they've merged these two books together, in no other religious tradition has somebody brought in a completely different teaching that was his own teaching, that was specified to a group of people that he was presenting it to, and was came through this person, this specific person, and then merged it together with their former religion. Okay, so Buddha was born in Hinduism, and Hinduism is not the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata and these other Hindu type religious texts aren't merged together with Buddha's teaching. He might talk about them, he might draw from them, he might explain some things from them in his teachings, but his teachings are a whole different set of teachings that are specific to Buddhists and the Buddhist religion and the Buddhist teachings and the teachings of the Buddha. And so I think it's very clear, based in his own teachings and his actions and the way he lived his life, that he had transcended these teachings. He had transcended his religion. Jesus had transcended his religion. And so therefore, there was no sense that he wanted his teachings and the teachings of the Old Testament to be merged together. And he doesn't prescribe any of the things that are prescribed by God or whoever in the Old Testament. He doesn't say do animal sacrifices. He didn't say any of these things. I've covered this in other videos. And so I think this is something for everybody to think about, because there are a lot of actions taken by Christian governments, certainly in Europe, and Christian people, where they think vengeance is okay, where they think this type of, punishment, and some of the negativity and negative actions that are presented in the Old Testament are okay. And if you remove those, you remove that teaching from all these people that believe in are Christians, then that changes what they can give themselves permission to do. It changes the whole orientation towards life. And ultimately, I believe that this all goes against Jesus' intentions, and I don't think he's happy about this, based on my interpretation and just what my heart feels about it and what I see and the effects of putting these two books together. And I want to say, for me, in all of these things, the information I present on this YouTube channel comes from my meditation and my personal experience and the information that's given to me by whoever. And I feel like in many ways, this information was given to me directly by Jesus because of the large amount of Christians that come here. And so I am just relaying this information like I do in my other videos, in my what people would think are my opinions. But for the most part, I consider myself a conduit. I have my own opinions, I have my own thinking process, but the information comes into me. Of course, I do some research in the physical world, and so it's emergence of these different things. It's emergence of my own opinions and mine and experiences and the lens in which I view the world, but the majority of the information comes from what I consider the source, connecting to God, meditating on God, and connecting and having a direct relationship, a heart-to-heart relationship, where information and energies are exchanged. And so I would encourage people, because I think this is important for all people, because this decision to merge these two books together has been a large part of why the world is the way it is now. And I would encourage Christian brothers and sisters to meditate or pray directly to Jesus and get your own answer on this. I'm just presenting this information again because I don't think you've heard this anywhere else, and it's something for everyone to consider. Okay, so these are just a few thoughts, and everybody have a blessed day.